Today's lesson is about math functions in JavaScript. So first of all, these are some math functions that they've got in JavaScript. They're all found under the Math tab. So if you look at question number 1 on your sheet, addition is the first one. The subtraction sign is the first subtraction. Multiplication is a bit weird. We don't use a cross, we use the star. Division is a slash. Random numbers, round, if you want to round something off, and another random number. So you can fill those in quickly. So to kind of see what it looks like when you run an app, here's an example here. It's going to get a Canadian temperature and convert it to the American scale. So we enter the Celsius and we'll get out the Fahrenheit. So here we go. Here's the code that would go with it. So if we're just going to do some quick analysis of this code, we have our button, and the ID of the button can be found. It's right up here. The onEvent temp, it's going to be our ID of our button. So these variables are the variables that would be created in RAM. If you remember, a variable is a little box in RAM. Both of them are numbers. The first one is Celsius, and our user would press the little button, and then this little prompt number would pop up. They'd put in 32, and that would get put in memory. Then what would happen is the next line of code would run, this Fahrenheit line of code, and when you run that, it would do the little calculation, and it would calculate that it was 89.6. So when you're looking at this code here, the first thing that runs would be the first thing that ran in bedness. So the very first part that would run would be the multiplication, then the division, and then the addition. The widget that gets updated is the last line here. It's in the set text, and the widget name is first. You remember it's in quotes, and it's ants. We don't put the variable in quotes. Be careful to remember that, and right, that's being updated at the end. So you now can look at question 2's code. You can see that if we want to answer the first question, the names of the two variables. So if we take a look in the code, there they are. And so we can put in the radius and the area. They're both numbers. So of those two variables, one of them is being used to hold the user's input. And we can find that by looking at the prompt num. That's going to be holding an input then. And so that means that it'll be the radius. So we're going to take line 2, there's line 2, and line 2, we're writing it as it is in math class. We've got pi, which is the 3.14159, times the radius, which will give us radius squared. All right. Then if the user types in number 1, what's going to be outputted exactly is we're going to be entering in the so we're going to get the 3.14 from the algorithm, from the little line. Then we're going to multiply it times the input, which was 1 times 1, and that just works out as 3.14159. So we just put that in, and make sure you put in the words too. So make sure you put in the area is, and then the answer. That gets you a nice answer on the screen. When you're doing question 3, I don't think it'll be too bad. You're going to fill in the blanks. Assume it's in the same app as the one above. So the onEvent will be the same onEvent as the one above. But when you're figuring out the math, you're figuring it out about an ice cube. Make sure you read this question and make sure you see the little equation there. When you're moving on to the back, there's some examples of your EQAO formulas from last year translated into AppLab. So the part, I've got the blocks shown for you here. So for example, here's the perimeter of a trapezoid printed out in blocks. But when you're writing it down, I'd recommend you just write it like the second line, so as it would appear in text mode. And I'd recommend that you do that as well with the area. It's a little less confusing with all these extra brackets and extra layers. So just to notice how we write pi, we're writing pi as 3.14159. We're writing r squared, we're simply writing, if you see over here we've got an r squared, so we're going r times r. So we're actually kind of doing it out manually. So you hit to write a half, you're going to write, there's 1 up here, so it's going to be 1 divided by 2 is up here in this area of a trapezoid formula. So just another example. So this is the Flashcard app, and what it does is in the first screen you see the number fact, and then you try to remember what it is, and you can check whether or not you got the right answer, and then you can get a whole new exciting question. So the code for this is found here. And so we've got some global variables up at the top here, and these global variables are a bit special because they're not inside the onEvent. So you can see the onEvent starts at 3, and another onEvent starts at 8. So that means that these variables will be remembered for all the onEvents. So they'll exist for the other onEvents, and we'll be able to remember them between the clicks. And that's why we put them out here. You did something similar in your Count Me In app. I think you had a number up there as well. So those are the two variables that exist in the start. And what happens when we click on the button, check answer, is it does a little calculation, and it's going to calculate n1 times n2. So at the very beginning we have 8 times 9, so it's going to calculate what that answer is. It's going to store it in the variable answer. So then it stores at 72. So then the next thing that changes in this check button is that the answer, which is right here, the question mark, will become equal to the answer, which is 72. So that gets put on the screen. To get a new question, what we do is we get a new random number, and we get another new random number, and then we're going to change number 1, which is right here, to be whatever our random number is, and then number 2, which is to be whatever other random number is. So the computer here has picked 2 new values. It ran those 2 lines of code, so we've got this number and this number. So we've got a 7 and a 5, and that will show up on the screen in those spots. We're going to change number 1, number 2, and we're going to change the answer back to be question mark, question mark. And that's how that one works. And that's all. Try to work on your worksheet and then head on back to your work.